I never thought a simple dirt road would turn into the most aggressive power grab I'd ever witnessed. That road had existed long before the HOA, long before the manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. It cut through my land, connected my workshop to the county highway, and appeared clearly on every deed I owned. I used it daily, without drama, until one morning orange cones appeared like a warning flare. The HOA president stood there with a clipboard, flanked by 2 board members, announcing that the road was now community access. No meeting, no notice, no permission. They claimed emergency authority, citing vague bylaws and fabricated safety concerns. According to them, my private road was suddenly public, and I was expected to smile and comply. At first, I laughed. I assumed it was a misunderstanding that would collapse under basic facts. I pulled my survey, property maps, and title insurance documents. I emailed copies. I explained calmly that the road sat entirely on my parcel and had never been dedicated to the HOA. Their response was silence, followed by action that crossed from arrogance into outright theft. Within days, residents began using the road constantly. SUVs, contractors, delivery vans, even school drop-offs. My quiet mornings disappeared under engine noise and dust clouds. Someone clipped my fence. Another car nearly hit my dog. When I complained, the HOA sent a violation letter accusing me of obstructing community infrastructure. That was the moment I realized this wasn't confusion. It was strategy. If they used the road long enough, they believed possession would become ownership. They treated my land like a loophole they could bully into submission. Every interaction carried the same message: fight us and we'll bury you in fines, lawyers, and delays. I tried one last civil approach. I requested a formal meeting, presented evidence, and asked for immediate restoration of my access rights. The board listened with bored expressions, then voted to temporarily maintain the road for HOA use. Temporary, in their language, meant forever. Walking back to my truck, I watched another line of cars stream past, drivers waving like they belonged there. Something snapped. Not rage, not panic, but clarity. If they wanted my road, they were going to learn exactly what ownership meant, line by line, law by law. Backhand index pointing right before we go any further. Make sure you subscribe, because what I did next turned their entire neighborhood upside down and forced the HOA into full damage control mode. That night, I sat at my desk, spread the documents out again, and noticed a detail I'd overlooked. The road was private, yes, but more importantly, every vehicle using it was doing so without a recorded easement. No agreement. No access rights. Just trespass, repeated dozens of times every day. I didn't plan revenge. I planned enforcement. And the HOA had no idea how exposed they really were. I knew the risk, but the law was clear, and clarity breeds confidence. By sunrise, I had a checklist, phone numbers, and a timeline. Every option pointed toward accountability, not chaos. They had mistaken patience for weakness, paperwork for fear. I slept well, because the rules were finally about to apply equally. Tomorrow, engines would roll in expecting passage. Instead, they would meet consequences designed carefully, legally, and permanently, beginning with the first tire that crossed my boundary. Nothing about it was impulsive, personal, or loud. It was quiet, methodical, and rooted in statutes, records, and responsibility, the kind that changes behavior when excuses finally run out. Ownership isn't declared by votes. It's enforced by boundaries everyone must respect eventually. The next morning, the first cars rolled onto my road like they owned it. Trucks, SUVs, even a few flashy sedans, all moving with the confidence of people who thought authority was on their side. I watched from the edge of the property, clipboard in hand, documenting every vehicle and license plate. Everything was by the book. Nothing reckless. I called the HOA president first. Calmly. Explained again that the road was private, that there were no easements, and that continued use constituted trespassing. Her tone was familiar, smug, dismissive, as if she assumed I'd back down. But the reality was different. I had already prepared the legal leverage needed to enforce my property rights. By mid-morning, I started methodically marking the vehicles. Not physically, not dangerously, just notes, timestamps, photos, and plate numbers. Every infraction was cataloged. Within a few hours, I had a full record of the entire neighborhood using my private road without permission. Karen, the HOA president, appeared again in person, clipboard in hand, flanked by two board members. She demanded access, insisting that the road was communal. I pointed at my documents, surveys, and deeds, and explained the situation once more. Her face twisted, a mix of confusion and anger. She hadn't anticipated someone knowing the law better than she did. Then I took the next step. Not illegal. Not violent. Entirely legal. I arranged for every vehicle using my road to be legally ticketed and towed, in accordance with county codes. Each tow was documented. Each fine was issued officially. By afternoon, several HOA members were scrambling to retrieve their cars. The calls to Karen started coming in, panicked, pleading, demanding explanations. She hadn't considered what ownership really meant. I had anticipated this. Every action calculated and within legal bounds. Neighbors watched in disbelief. Some were furious at the disruption. Others were quietly impressed. Everyone realized that the road wasn't theirs and that the person behind the gate wasn't bluffing. Karen called again, yelling this time, threatening to sue, claiming damages, and citing bylaws that didn't apply. I handed everything over to my attorney. Every call, every letter, every vehicle movement was fully documented. The HOA had overstepped, and the law was finally enforcing boundaries that had been ignored for years. By sunset, the chaos had settled. Cars that once streamed freely were gone, temporarily replaced by empty driveways and angry homeowners. Karen, the supposed authority, was now left to deal with the fallout of her own assumptions. She had believed access equaled ownership, but that day proved something far more important. Boundaries are enforced by knowledge, patience, and consistency, not by loud voices or assumed power. This was just the beginning. In the next section, Karen would escalate in ways she thought would intimidate me, but by then, she had already learned she was playing a game she could not win. Karen's meltdown started quietly, with passive-aggressive emails and terse phone calls, but it escalated quickly. By midweek, she was orchestrating a full-blown neighborhood panic campaign. Flyers appeared in mailboxes warning residents that the road closure was illegal, that the landowner was blocking community access, and that everyone should document the situation. I stayed calm. Everything I had done so far was completely legal. I had deeds, surveys, timestamps, photos, and official tow records. Every claim the HOA made could be refuted in minutes. But Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about pressure. She thought volume could substitute for legality. The next morning, a few residents tried to sneak vehicles back onto the road. I intercepted them, not physically but legally. A quick call to the towing company confirmed that every car attempting unauthorized access would be impounded immediately. By lunchtime, 3 more vehicles were gone, and the panic grew. The HOA's plan to assert control was backfiring spectacularly. Karen personally showed up again, this time demanding a meeting. I agreed, but only with witnesses and legal representatives present. She arrived flanked by 2 board members, a neighborhood resident, and her phone camera. The air was thick with tension. She started with accusations: trespassing, harassment, abuse of authority. I countered calmly, presenting my documentation, property deeds, and county records. Every claim she made fell apart under scrutiny. The HOA members and Karen's supporters started whispering among themselves. They had relied on assumption for years, assuming the road belonged to the community, assuming no one would enforce private property laws. That assumption had finally collided with reality. By the end of the meeting, Karen was visibly flustered. The attorney explained the potential liabilities: fines, lawsuits, and personal exposure if HOA actions continued to encroach on private property. Suddenly, Karen's confident demeanor crumbled. Her threats became hollow, her words weak. Outside the meeting, neighbors began approaching me quietly. Some apologized for believing the HOA's narrative. Others asked questions about their own rights and responsibilities. The community was realizing that the power they thought Karen had was only a facade. Later that week, the county zoning office got involved after reports of multiple unauthorized vehicle removals. Not because I acted outside the law, but because Karen's mismanagement and the HOA's overreach were now on official record. Inspectors verified the property lines and confirmed that the road belonged entirely to me. Any further attempt by the HOA to assert access would be illegal. Karen's authority in the neighborhood had taken a severe hit. Residents stopped following her instructions, and many began questioning every previous directive. The foundation of control she had relied upon for years was cracking. By the time I walked back to the gate that evening, everything felt quieter. The road was clear. The towed vehicles had been retrieved legally. The HOA had been exposed for overreach, and Karen was now forced to deal with the legal consequences of her own assumptions. In the next section, you'll see exactly how the HOA and Karen responded when the county and the residents began taking action, ultimately leading to a complete collapse of their power. With the county fully aware of the situation, the HOA began to panic. Karen tried to rally the board, but without a legal foundation, their arguments fell flat. The county had confirmed that the road was private property, and any further attempt to force access could result in fines or legal action against the HOA itself. Karen's tactics shifted from bold threats to desperate maneuvers. She tried organizing a community protest at my gate, hoping to intimidate me into reopening it. Several residents showed up, holding signs and waving flyers, while Karen lectured them on their supposed obligations. But this time, I didn't react emotionally. Cameras were rolling, every conversation documented. I knew the law was on my side. The HOA sent formal letters threatening legal action if I continued restricting access. Each one was met with a calm, legal response from my attorney, citing property deeds, county regulations, and documentation of past trespassing. Karen was growing visibly frustrated. Her authority was evaporating in real time. Some residents started questioning Karen's judgment publicly. During a board meeting, several voiced concerns about mismanagement and unauthorized directives. A few even demanded that the HOA cover the costs for towing and legal fees the board had unnecessarily incurred. Karen tried to regain control but realized the room had shifted. The residents weren't just skeptical, they were actively siding against her. Meanwhile, the county issued formal notices warning the HOA that continued interference could lead to personal liability for board members. Karen suddenly understood that the road closure wasn't just about inconvenience, it was a matter of accountability. The power she had wielded for years was now completely meaningless. By midweek, Karen's final attempt to intimidate me, a letter demanding immediate removal of the gate, backfired. My attorney responded with a detailed explanation of property rights, the legality of the gate, and the documented misuse of my road by HOA vehicles.
Copies were sent to the county.
Now, Karen faced official scrutiny and public embarrassment. Within days, several board members resigned quietly, citing personal liability concerns. The community's faith in Karen had crumbled. She had lost control of the narrative, the neighborhood, and ultimately, her reputation. The very people she had intended to influence now understood the consequences of her overreach. At the gate that evening, the sun set across the road, peaceful and quiet for the first time in weeks. Karen's threats had failed. The county's involvement ensured compliance, residents had been educated, and the road, legally mine, remained secure. In the final section, we'll see how Karen's meltdown concluded, how the neighborhood adapted, and why that locked gate became a permanent symbol of lawful authority and ownership. The days following Karen's meltdown felt surreal. The HOA was exposed, the board fractured, and the residents were finally seeing the truth. The road never belonged to them. Karen's authority had evaporated. Her threats, letters, and attempts at intimidation had no effect. Legal ownership and documentation had won the day. The county issued final confirmations. The road was private property, my gate was fully within my rights, and any further unauthorized use would be treated as trespassing. The HOA had no leverage, and the residents now knew it. Karen's frantic emails and phone calls slowed to nothing. She had tried to wield assumed power, but she had miscalculated entirely. Interestingly, some residents approached me, not with anger, but with curiosity and even gratitude. They asked questions about their property lines, legal rights, and how they could avoid similar mistakes. It became clear that many had blindly followed Karen's directives for years, never verifying claims or understanding the law themselves. That was a silent victory I hadn't expected. The road stayed quiet. Cars no longer streamed across my property without permission. The gate, once a simple steel barrier, had become a symbol, authority backed by knowledge and the law. Every time it closed, it wasn't just a lock. It was a reminder that assumptions and intimidation cannot override ownership. Karen tried to regain control later, attempting to run for a board position in another nearby HOA, but her reputation preceded her. Her tactics no longer worked. Residents knew the truth, and her authority was gone. I didn't celebrate publicly. I didn't taunt her or flaunt victory. The road remained private, the gate remained locked, and life returned to normal. Peace, after all, is the ultimate reward for standing your ground legally and methodically. This story isn't about revenge. It's about knowledge, preparation, and the courage to enforce your rights. The HOA had tried to take my road without asking, but legal ownership, patience, and careful planning ensured the outcome was clear. The gate stayed shut, the vehicles were gone, and Karen and her board learned a hard lesson that authority without ownership is meaningless. The neighborhood moved on. The road stayed under my control. And every time someone looks at that locked gate, they remember one undeniable truth. Ownership beats entitlement every single time.